The wind on Sulis. 9 always carried the scent of iron. It cut across the barren flats like a warning, sharp, dry, and silent. Sergeant Dax Ryland had learned not to trust quiet places, especially not since the war ended. Peace treaties were just pauses. Anyway, the kind where everyone reloaded. He stood at the edge of a crater that hadn't been there yesterday. The sun, a weak amber disk, hung low behind fractured clouds, casting long shadows across the scorched plain. His HUD flickered as he scanned the wreckage below. Metallic fragments were scattered across the sand like alien bones. Something had fallen here. Hard. Dax descended cautiously, pulse rifle drawn. The site was fresh, still radiating heat signatures. A ship, or maybe an escape pod. Not standard human make. He could tell from the curvature. Too organic, too elegant. Archon design. That meant trouble. No one was supposed to be out here, least of all someone from Archaea. The war was over, or so Command kept saying. Half buried under twisted alloy, a hatch hissed as Dax approached. He crouched, aimed. No movement. Then, faintly a sound, a soft mewling cry. Not mechanical. Not adult. He lowered the rifle. The hatch groaned open at his touch. Inside, amidst shredded insulation and shattered panels, lay something he did not expect. A pod cradle, intact. Inside it, a small figure stirred, wrapped in a heat-preserving fiber mesh. Tiny limbs trembling in confusion or fear. A baby. More than that. An alien infant. Archon. Its skin held the faint shimmer of nacre, blue-gray under the emergency lights. Its head was slightly elongated, with ridges along the brow and cheeks. Eyes too large, too bright, but unmistakably a baby, fragile, helpless, crying. Dax's chest tightened. He took a step back. His fingers twitched on the rifle's grip. Protocol dictated termination. Unidentified biological life form. Potential threat. He should report it, wait for collection or incineration. The baby turned its head. Locked eyes with him. It didn't flinch. Didn't shrink away. Just stared. Then, almost imperceptibly, it reached one hand up toward him. Dax's breath caught. He hadn't held a child in years. Not since Marin. Not since the fever on Altus took her before her 3rd birthday, leaving behind a silence that no battlefield could match. He had buried those feelings in desert dust, in command lines, in the crack of rifles and the thrum of dropships. But this look, this silent plea, punched through him like nothing else had. He lowered his rifle completely. "I shouldn't be doing this," he muttered, stepping into the pod and scooping the child into his arms. It was warm, so light. The cries stopped immediately. The baby blinked up at him, then nestled against his chest like it had always belonged there. A proximity alert flashed across his visor. Dax swore. He sprinted up the slope, baby cradled to his chest, armor hissing as it adjusted to his movements. Back at his scout ship, a repurposed tactical flyer nicknamed the Crow, he slid into the cockpit and sealed the hatch. Alarms were already going off. A command drone was approaching. No doubt it had detected the crash, too. He powered up the engines, punching in a random vector. As the Crow lifted off, the command drone crested the ridge and began transmitting identification codes. Dax killed the feed. He didn't respond. He was now officially AWOL. The infant stirred in his arms. He strapped it gently into the co-pilot's chair, wrapping it in his field jacket for warmth. It gazed at him with unblinking eyes. No fear. No accusation. "You better be worth it," he whispered. 3 hours later, they were halfway through uncharted space near the edge of the Ashen Veil Nebula. The baby had fallen asleep, occasionally emitting faint clicks and trills in its rest. Alien vocalizations that tug at something primal inside Dax. He hadn't decided what to call it. Not it. That felt wrong. "Nova," he said aloud. The baby didn't stir. "Fits, doesn't it? You showed up like a star falling out of nowhere." The moment felt surreal. He, a soldier with blood on his hands, was now carrying an enemy's child through unauthorized space. It didn't make sense. But somewhere in the wreckage of his moral compass, this felt right. Not safe, not strategic, but human. He opened a secure compartment and took out a med drone. Its diagnostics were basic, but it scanned Nova without protest. The results were promising. Minor dehydration, a cracked collarbone that was already healing at an abnormal rate, strange cellular patterns. Not dangerous. Not yet. A blinking red icon interrupted him. An encrypted message from command. Sergeant Ryland, respond. We've tracked your vessel to Sector K-94. You have not filed a crash report or returned to base. Be advised. If you are harboring unauthorized personnel or technology, your status will be reclassified under Article 8, treason. He closed the message. Not deleted. Just closed. He leaned back and looked at Nova, now curled up against the jacket like a hatchling. You're going to get me killed, he murmured. But still, he didn't turn around. In the silence of deep space, the Crow drifted toward a new horizon, unregistered, unsanctioned, and tethered to a mystery that would soon make him the galaxy's most wanted. And Dax Ryland, once loyal to command, once numb to everything, now found himself risking everything to protect a life that didn't even come from his world. Because some truths weren't written in protocol. They were felt. Nova cried when the engines cut out. The sound pierced through the hum of auxiliary systems like a memory Dax couldn't bury, raw, high-pitched, desperate. He reached across the console, brushing the back of his hand against the child's cheek, trying to soothe her, though the shaking in his fingers betrayed more than the turbulence outside. They had slipped through the edge of the ashen veil, but barely. The magnetic storms had fried most of the long-range comms and fried a quarter of the Crow's shielding. What remained of his stealth drive was being held together with carbon tape and desperation. They needed a place to land, repair, hide. Fast. Nova had grown quiet, eyes wide as she took in the flickering panels and dancing embers of light that still floated in the cabin from a nebula's residue. It wasn't just her alien biology that unnerved him. It was how calm she seemed in chaos. Like she already knew it, expected it, accepted it. Dax brought up a star chart overlay. One signal, low-level and unclaimed, pulsed from the edge of a defunct research station listed only as Facility 47R. It had been scrubbed from active use decades ago. Something about ethical violations and funding cuts. That meant no patrols. No questions. He set course. They landed with a bone-rattling thud. The station loomed half-buried in asteroid dust, its surface cracked from micro-impacts and neglect, but its interior still hummed faintly with power. Emergency reserves. Enough for light. Heat. Maybe shelter for a few days if the place didn't eat them. He carried Nova across the entry hall, scanning for heat signatures. Nothing. The place was dead. Or sleeping. The inside was a ghost of science. Fractured glass, yellowing screens, data pads floating lifeless in microgravity. Dax ducked into a small med bay and found a corner where the ceiling hadn't collapsed. He fashioned a nest of thermal blankets and laid Nova down, watching as she curled inward, eyelids fluttering. The silence that followed was unsettling, but peaceful. That peace shattered less than an hour later. He'd been rerouting power from auxiliary grid panels when the alarm triggered a proximity ping. Subtle, but unmistakable. Someone had traced them. It didn't take long to find out who. Colonel Arden Venner. Dax recognized the transmission signature before the message even loaded. Sergeant Ryland. Came the voice, too smooth for the accusation it carried. You've crossed lines you can't uncross. Bring the specimen in. No harm will come to you. Dax snorted, cutting the feed. Venner was a tactician wrapped in silver armor and diplomatic half-lies. He had personally overseen the last wave of bombing during the Archon final siege, where civilians had vanished by the hundreds. Command loved him. Dax had never trusted him. He watched Nova sleep, tiny hands balled into fists. A line of blue shimmered faintly along her wrist, some kind of internal pulse, rhythmic and alien. He'd run scans earlier, found no weapons, no implants. But there was something in her blood, reactive cells that responded to emotion. When she cried, the air temperature shifted subtly. When she laughed, gravity monitors blipped like static. She wasn't just a child. She was a living power source. Or a bomb, depending on who you asked. Dax found an old AI interface console in the core chamber, cracked but partially functional. He bypassed its ancient encryption with a few tweaks from his neural chip and called up the last logs from the station's researchers. The files were fragmented. Static, audio clips buried in ghost code. Infant arrived via anomaly breach, not human, not entirely Archon either. Subject displays accelerated adaptation. Symbiosis with energy fields. Communicates via harmonic resonance. If weaponized, could render both human and Archon technologies obsolete. Then silence. The next file was dated exactly 1 day before the station was shut down. And then nothing. Dax leaned back. Nova wasn't just important. She was pivotal. A hybrid born of impossible means. Maybe the first true link between their species. Or the last. Venner wouldn't just capture her. He'd dissect her. Dax moved fast after that. He began wiring defensive traps into the bulkheads, activating old drones sentries using parts scavenged from the medical bay. The AI, whom he named Ivy from the voice tag embedded in the logs, offered assistance with control panels and atmospheric sealing. Time ran out anyway. The dropships came low, quiet, coated with cloaking foam that made them shimmer like ghosts against the station's surface. Dax watched from a broken observation deck as boots hit asteroid soil, dozens of soldiers fanning out, weapons drawn, scanners active. They wouldn't shoot to kill. Not him. Not yet. But they'd take Nova. He returned to the med bay. She was awake now, watching him, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, they were glowing faintly, like molten crystal behind water. "You feel them coming, don't you?" he asked. She reached out, touched his chest. His heartbeat slowed, not in fear, but as if she'd calibrated it. A hiss sounded through the vents. The soldiers were breaching. Dax gathered Nova close and pressed the last sequence into Ivy's core. Lock down, fall back, redirect life support to sublevel 3. Alarm screamed. Fire suppression fog burst through the walls. The first breach squad entered. Dax led them into a narrow hallway rigged with plasma charge barriers. 2 went down before the rest retreated. He didn't stop. He kept running, Nova tight against him, breath heaving. The station felt alive now, defensive systems pulsing back to life as if responding to her presence. They ducked into a side corridor, and the moment the bulkhead closed, the walls lit up with strange glyphs, Archon in structure, but fused with something else. Something that made Dax's cybernetic implants buzz uncomfortably. Nova raised her hand toward the glyphs. They responded. A soft hum filled the chamber, followed by a rush of static across every frequency. Then silence. Outside, every weapon in the squad froze. Lights dimmed. The cloaking foam shorted out. Soldiers screamed over open channels. Nothing responded. Venner's command ship hovered above, paralyzed mid-hover. Dax stared at Nova. She wasn't afraid. Her face was calm. A child's body, but something ancient moved behind those eyes now. Not threatening. Not cruel. Just aware. Venner's voice cracked through static again, desperate this time. "She's destabilizing my fleet's core matrix. Shut her down. Now!" Dax stood slowly, raised his rifle, not at her, but at the surveillance lens still active in the chamber ceiling. "Stand down," he said. "You're not getting her. And if you try, she'll finish what we started." There was silence. Then the feed cut. He sank to the floor, Nova nestled against him, breathing slow and deep. The hum faded. The glyphs went dark. But the war, Dax knew, had just changed shape. He wasn't running anymore. He was protecting the future. The surface of Hollow Reach was jagged, a ruin of rusted machinery and half-buried pylons that once tethered satellites to a forgotten listening post. Dax stood beneath a fractured dome of pressure glass, watching the stars flicker like cold memories. Nova sat beside him, wrapped in the insulated folds of his jacket, her strange eyes reflecting the constellations in silence. She hadn't spoken. She couldn't, not in human words, but the weight of her presence was never small. The air around her always felt charged, like a storm waiting for a reason. They'd been here 2 nights. Venner hadn't given up. Dax hadn't expected him to. Recon drones were already sweeping the outer crust, cloaked and quiet, their scans slicing through atmosphere and stone alike. Hollow Reach wasn't on any active chart. Officially, it didn't exist. But that didn't mean it was invisible. Ivy, now fully integrated into the Reach's old systems, kept them a step ahead, but Dax knew the margin was shrinking. The Colonel wasn't just tracking them anymore. He was preparing a final move. Dax adjusted the ion disruptors rigged along the outer corridors. They weren't meant for large-scale defense, but they might buy a few minutes, enough to escape, or at least send Nova to safety. He didn't pretend he could win. He just had to hold the line long enough for something else to change. She tugged on his sleeve. He looked down. Nova pointed toward the stars, then at her own chest. Her fingers traced the air in slow, deliberate arcs, symbols maybe, a language not yet translated. But he understood the meaning. Somehow, she was trying to say she belonged out there. That this, all of this, was not where she was meant to stay. You and me both, Dax said quietly. She rested her head against his arm. The gesture was so ordinary, so human, it almost hurt. The warning chime sounded. They were here. Dax sealed the inner doors and activated the fallback system Ivy had engineered, redirecting heat signatures to dozens of false nodes, overloading the sensors of any incoming troops. But the main hallway, the real path, remained open. Venner wouldn't be fooled for long. He was too careful, too calculating. Dax wasn't banking on confusion. He was banking on a message. He recorded it quickly, voice steady, face lit by the pale glow of the core reactor. To anyone who finds this, my name is Dax Ryland. I was a soldier once. I've broken a dozen codes and gone dark from a command I no longer trust. What I found out here isn't a threat. It's a chance. Nova isn't a weapon. She's something else. She's a reason peace might mean more than surrender. He paused, then added, If I don't make it, don't bury the truth with me. The door seals broke open with a thunderous crack. Dax stepped between Nova and the corridor, weapon drawn. Dust billowed into the chamber as armored boots crunched forward. 6 soldiers, followed by Venner himself. He wore sleek obsidian plating and a neural halo that shimmered like oil in the low light. His gaze locked on the child instantly. You've delayed this long enough, Sergeant, he said, voice cold. Step aside. This ends now. She's not yours, Dax said. She's not anyone's. She's a convergence event, a threat, and a prize. Nova stood. Dax tried to stop her, but she walked forward, calm and steady. Venner's men raised their weapons. The lights flickered. Then she spoke, without words. The air trembled. The walls groaned. Every interface lit up in a burst of cascading energy as Nova lifted her hand and pulsed a wave of resonant force through the room. The weapons shorted out in an instant. Venner's neural halo sparked violently. He stumbled, clutching his head. She's sinking with a grid. Ivy whispered through Dax's earpiece. She's not just using power. She's becoming the system. Nova turned to Dax. Her eyes, now fully alight, carried a kind of sorrow. She raised both hands. A field formed around them, an iridescent sphere humming with motion. A shield, a barrier, a goodbye. No, wait, he started, but she smiled just a flicker before the wave expanded. The explosion was silent. Not fire, not heat, just light. Venner and his squad were thrown back like paper in wind, unconscious before they hit the ground. The dome above cracked but held, refracting the light into fractal halos across the sky. When it cleared, she was gone. The place where she'd stood was scorched with a circle of energy still shimmering like breath on glass. Dax fell to his knees, blinking against the afterglow. Ivy's voice returned after a long silence. She triggered a zero jump through layered resonance. No engine, no gate. She made her own path. Where did she go? He asked, but already knew the answer. Somewhere she was needed. He stood slowly, chest tight, bones aching. The corridor lay littered with unconscious bodies. He could run now. He could disappear. But he didn't. Instead, he walked to Venner, knelt, and removed the colonel's comm implant. The man groaned but didn't wake. Dax raised the device to his lips. Command, this is Sergeant Ryland. I have critical intel regarding Operation Hollow Reach and non-combatant engagement violations. You want to hear this? He set the implant down, let it record, and then he walked out beneath the fractured dome, looked up at the stars, and waited for dawn.